This is Encounters in Humanities, offered by Kirkwood Community College. This is a video PowerPoint to accompany the textbook for the course Perceiving the Arts by Dennis J. Spore. The information in this video is intended to accompany that which is included in the textbook. I hope it is informative and that you enjoy some of the images and ideas that I bring up. One of the first things that I think is important to do when starting a class like this is to first think of why this class is offered, why people are asked to take this class, and why people are asked to study the arts in general. From students, I often hear things like, why are we bothering to study the arts? What is the use of this to me? After all, it's very rare that the people who are in this class are going to become professional artists or professional art critics. Most of the people really are just going to be the audience for art that other people are making. So why is it that a class is needed when to be an audience really isn't something that's a skill one needs always to learn? And I think there are really a lot of answers to these questions, but then of course, I would have a lot of answers to these questions. After all, I'm paid to have answers to many of these questions. And I'm not asking to convince every single person who's listening to this, but I would like you to think about a few of these answers to the questions I've brought up here on this slide, and try to kind of make a connection to things in your life that possibly you could get better at, or skills you could learn by studying the arts. One of the reasons why I think a class like this is important is that people have, for it seems the entire history of human existence, been compelled to express themselves in lots of different ways. And many of those ways are through artistic means. It's not just in, writing down stories. People feel like they need to leave their fingerprints, if you will, on the world. They also make art. And an example of that I have in one of these pictures here. It's a cave painting of a very fat and happy looking horse. And there was a time where a human who couldn't really read because there wasn't any language and really couldn't write anything wanted to leave this picture on this wall that then people could find hundreds of years later and make a connection with this person even though that person had been dead for thousands of years. And things like that I find are very powerful in the world of art. You can make connections with these people who have been compelled in the same way people are today to express themselves through artistic means. I also think there is a lot of pleasure to be had in analyzing and studying the arts and becoming more effective consumers of those things. Because the more you know about art, I think the more you're able to understand it and the more you can get out of it. Music improves people's lives, it seems, tremendously. It can change your mood, it can change your whole day. And that's a form of art. People are compelled to decorate the world around them, to improve it with landscape architecture or just general building architecture. So there is this kind of pleasure to be had in pure aesthetic sensation. And I think it also is a way that people's emotions can be stirred. People can feel things that sometimes in ordinary life aren't really brought up. We're not expected most of the time to really respond to tragic events, but in theater we often are, and it allows us to exercise emotions we sometimes don't get to exercise in a daily basis. With studying the arts, I think one of the things people learn is a variety of techniques to find meaning in different situations. Techniques to find meaning in pictures, meaning in the written word, meaning in sound, and to really use all of these senses to look at the world around them and figure out what things mean and figure out how they can relate to those things. And this sensory impressions, I think, is what makes the art so exciting, because you're not just using your eyes to read something, you're also looking at things and touching things and moving about, listening to things. It's really involving all of the senses, which I think makes it rather fun most of the time. There's also the opportunity to understand new perspectives, the perspectives of the people who have been making these pieces of art for centuries upon centuries and all over the world. You can see how they saw the world and how they saw their lives and how they chose to express those things. And I think that's very interesting. By learning about new perspectives, it always can put your perspective in dialogue with theirs. And I think you can become a more well-rounded person by trying to understand how other people think and feel, sometimes about the same things that you think and feel about perhaps every day. And one of the last sort of ideas I'm going to leave you with is that when it comes to studying the arts or learning about how to interpret these things, and nobody's being asked to do this professionally, and it's not something that I expect you to become an expert on by the end of this class. But what I'd like for each person is that they're able to take what they learn from this class and go out into the world and maybe look at things a little bit longer, or listen to music for a little bit longer and think about what's actually being created there and what kind of things are being expressed to you. And I think by spending just a little bit more time trying to understand things a little bit deeper than what a person might normally do, it creates in the person who's doing that thinking and that feeling a general desire to think and to feel and to understand everything on a deeper level. So these are skills that, even though we're using to understand the arts, can be then applied to things outside of the arts, to look at things, to try to understand them, and to get some meaning. And because of those reasons, I find this class to be very exciting, and I hope you will too. So we'll continue on now with the rest of this introductory chapter and look at a few more of the terms that are brought up. In the section marked The Arts and Ways of Knowing, the text says, "Any book about the arts comprises a story about us, our perceptions of the world as we have come to see and respond to it, and the ways we have communicated our understandings to each other since the Ice Age more than 15,000 years ago." Our study in this text focuses on vocabulary and perception. First, however, we need to have an overview of where the arts fall within the general scope of human endeavor. So this section is really trying to put the arts in context with general knowledge. The first thing to keep in mind is that art exists in our everyday world. We pass artistic endeavor all of the time. We constantly come face to face with architecture, with sculpture, with music, with literature. This happens every day to everyone. So you must think of art as sort of an everyday thing, not something that's only brought out for special occasions, but something we come across just as a common occurrence. Studying the arts and humanities takes into account humanity through the ages. So you have to put this kind of study in the general context of history and culture and understanding all of those things kind of together. The arts are separated from the humanities often when we talk about them, but really when we do that it's kind of purposeless, because when it comes down to it, the humanities is this huge body of study which is about anything having to do with humans and their cultures. So anything that humans create or how humans express themselves, their culture, all of that is part of the humanities. And the arts is actually a section of the humanities. So the arts, when we talk about arts, it's things like, printmaking, photography, dance, cinema, that kind of stuff. Humanities is all of that, but it also includes things like anthropology and religion and different languages. So the arts and humanities are something just to keep in mind as this kind of big body of knowledge, and all of those things kind of talk to one another in different ways. And then the last thing in this section that your book has is this part on the creator. And the book writes that a creator can be different things at different times, depending on what they're making and why they're making it. On the one hand, they can be an experiencer. That is, someone who experiences things, who sees things, who feels things, and perhaps then becomes the reporter. Takes those things they've experienced, they've felt, they've seen, and reports those back in some way. Perhaps makes a painting or writes a story about those things. The creator can also be an analyst, trying to understand things and helping others understand those things through whatever they're making, be it a poem or a song or a dance. And the creator can also be an activist, someone who's trying to get people to themselves act out or speak out about something that perhaps the creator thinks of as unjust or needing some sort of action. So that's the arts and ways of knowing, how we're fitting what we're about to talk about throughout this semester and throughout this text, sort of hopefully in context with other types of knowledge and other things people might study.